Good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, January 19th, 2016 City Council meeting to order. Councilor Boschman, would you please lead us into the salute to the flag?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk.
President Kushmerek.
Present.
Councilor Bean, absent. Councilor Boschman.
Present.
Councilor Beazall.
Present.
Councilor Clark.
Here.
Councilor Di Natale.
Here.
Councilor Green. Here. Councilor Hay.
Here.
Councilor Joseph.
Here.
Councilor Caddy.
Here.
Councilor Tran.
Here.
Public forum. Anyone wishing to speak on a matter on the agenda may do so for not more than 2 minutes. If you're addressing a public hearing petition, you will have an opportunity to speak at that time. Please approach the center table and identify yourself by name and address for the record and the item number on the agenda which you are addressing. Does anyone wish to speak? Please state your name, address, sir, and the petition number that you're speaking to.
My name is Michael Ward. I live at 15 Stetson Street in Leominster, and I'm addressing a petition that I previously submitted, number 166-15.
Sir, unfortunately, that particular item is not on the agenda at this particular meeting, so we can't address that in the public
How do
hearing.
I go about addressing the agenda?
It would have to appear on a, there would have to be action taken at the committee level on a particular action item.
I submitted it initially. 3 months later, I got a letter from Attorney Barrett with his conclusions, and nobody ever contacted me about it. So what do I do next?
Sir, we can have a conversation offline after the meeting and figure out the next appropriate step for this particular
About what time
petition. Unfortunately, we don't have the documentation in front of us right now for me to recommend it.
About what time would that be?
You're more than welcome to either send myself or Madam Clerk an email or a phone call tomorrow.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
You can send a letter to me. Just refer it to me. If there's already a letter.
Anyone else wishing to speak to an item on the agenda?
Good evening. I'm Kit Walker. I live at Nandy Birch Street, Fitchburg, and I'm also a airport commissioner. And just like our newly appointed member, I'm pretty nervous in front of a bunch of people, so you're not alone. I wanted to address Petition 250-15. The airport is going to has our airport manager and also our engineering representative to present to you information concerning this petition, and I would hope that the City Council looks forward to that. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you.
Ready? Hello?
My name is Jeffrey Dumay. The petition.
Huh? Yes. Yes. Are you speaking regarding an item on the public hearing? Are you speaking to the special permit?
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have an opportunity in several minutes when we take up that issue in front of us.
So now,
Thank you.
all right. Sorry.
Anyone else wishing to speak to an item on the agenda other than a public hearing?
At appropriate time, I'd like to talk about 250-15. I don't know if that's after that subject.
You'll have an opportunity immediately following this. Thank you. All right. At this point, we'll review the minutes. Councilor Hay. I have a motion and second to accept the report from the Committee on Records. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? It is unanimous. Communications.
Actually, right now, we're going to do the report from the Appointments Committee right now.
All right. Appointments Committee. Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Appointments Committee met earlier this evening, and there were 3 new appointments. The first appointment, Airport Commission, Clayton R. Raymond, 559 Shea Street, Fitchburg, term to expire February 1st, 2018. Second, Richard Laboratory. I asked the chief earlier. Thanks, Chief. 404 Westminster Hill Road, Fitchburg, term to expire July 1st, 2016. And finally, License Commission, Donna Pollock, 509 Mechanic Street, Fitchburg, term to expire June 1st, 2018. All of these appointments were unanimous.
Second.
I have a motion and second to accept the report from the Appointments Committee. Speaking to the motion.
Mr. President, I am not on the Appointments Committee, but I wanted to state with regards to the Airport Commission appointments, I would hope that these appointments will move the commission forward in a fashion that suits a commission, which is to be an oversight board, not a micromanaging board who runs the airport, and pits the airport manager against tenants and so on and so forth. I have had to hear complaints for years, and I'm sick of hearing of them. So I hope that this gets through to the new commissioners, that you do not run the day-to-day operations of the airport. You have an airport manager to do that for you. And that's all I'd like to say on that, and I hope that that message carries through and through to the rest of the commission. Thank you.
Councilor Joseph.
First, I'd like to thank Ms. Pollock for coming forward, and the support that we have for her is for her long-term commitment to the city of Fitchburg and what she's done in all of her life and activity towards the helping Fitchburg. I'm glad that she stepped forward. It's a very important role for us, and I want to thank you for stepping forward on that, as well as the other two gentlemen that came forward. I mean, obviously, your commitment to the city of Fitchburg is well established, being on the fire department. I want to thank you for coming forward, new blood on the commissions, and it's not easy trying to continue to move the city of Fitchburg forward, but I think you all have the right heart to move the city forward. And my concern is basically the employee, having somebody that's a current city employee on a committee, and without the designation of a special city employee. I just want to make sure that if we appoint Mr. Liberatore tonight, he'll be able to act in that position when he takes that, when he gets sworn in.
Thank you. I have a motion and second to accept the Appointments Committee report.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Opposite.
One in opposition. Communications from His Honor the Mayor. Dear Honorable Councilors, I hereby reappoint and ask for the confirmation of Mr. Christopher Paquette of 777 Pleasant Street, Leominster, Mass. as the Assessor of the City of Fitchburg for a term to expire January 1st, 2019. Please feel free to contact with any further questions. Stephen L. DiNatale. Appointments. Dear Honorable Councilors, I hereby appoint and ask for the confirmation of the following appointees as full-time police officers to the City of Fitchburg Police Department. Mr. Tyler J. Robichaud, 260 Chester Street, Fitchburg, Mass. Ms. Julianne L. Salas, 303 Shea Street, Fitchburg, Mass. And Mr. Daniel P. Minicello, 27 Ward Street, Fitchburg, Mass. Please feel free to contact with me with any questions. Sincerely, Stephen L. DiNatale, Mayor. Appointments. Dear Ms. Farrell, I hereby appoint, effective immediately, Fire Captain Greg J. Normandin of 517 Rollstone Street, Fitchburg, Mass. to the rank of Permanent Deputy Fire Chief. Please feel free to contact me with any questions. Sincerely, Stephen L. DiNatale, Mayor. Chief, I believe you wanted to address that. Councilors, this will be sworn in this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Counselor. Before Greg, why don't you come on up? Just to give you a little background on Greg, I'm sure many of you know him. He's actually a Monty Tech graduate, Counselor. He is a lifelong resident of the city, second-generation firefighter. His dad's with him here tonight, as well as his mom and his sister. Greg was appointed to the department in 1986, so he's got 30 years on the job. He made lieutenant in 1995 and was promoted to captain in 2004. He's got vast experience in all ranks coming up through the department, and a very good fire officer. He actually trains through the fire academy. He trains firefighters throughout the state on nights and weekends, and has been our training coordinator for the last several years at Fitchburg Fire. So very knowledgeable in the job, very calm and a smart fire officer, and well respected within the department. So thank you very much, councilors.
Thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly promise and swear
I do solemnly promise and swear
that I will faithfully and impartially,
I will faithfully and impartially,
and to the best of my knowledge and ability,
and to the best of my knowledge and ability,
perform and discharge all the duties
perform and discharge all the duties
incumbent upon me
incumbent upon me
as permanent deputy fire chief
as permanent deputy fire chief
for the city of Fitchburg.
for the city of Fitchburg. Double shot. We can call the paramedics. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Joseph. Thank you. Thank you.
One more communication.
Yep. All right, one final communication from His Honor, from department heads. To the Fitchburg City Council from Larry Casas, Acting Community Development Director, dated January 14th, 2016, regarding Year 42 Community Development Block Grant applications. The first Community Development Block Grant public hearing will be held on Thursday, January 28th, 2016, at 6 p.m. in a Memorial Middle School library located at 615 Rollstone Street before the Fitchburg Planning Board. At the public hearing, Year 42 applicants will be invited to speak about the merits of their proposals and answer any related questions. As the City Council plans for an important role in the funding decisions for this program, this is an opportunity for you to become better informed about each proposal. An outline of the Year 42 proposals is attached. If you are interested in a particular application, please let us know, and we will send you a full copy of the application. Please see the enclosed. Moving on to the agenda. Public hearings. Hearing 250-15, Joseph Posnick, Chairman on behalf of the Airport Commission, to petition the City of Fitchburg to accept as a gift, purchase, or take by eminent domain under Chapter 79, Section 1 of Massachusetts General Laws, permanent navigation easements located in the area of Battles Avenue as outlined in the enclosed petition. Declare this hearing open.
Mr. President, I had a communication.
Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Ellison, the airport manager. We have been working on this navigation easement project for over 2 years now, and we're at the stage where we're actually going to be
We're going to make a motion.
to talk about what we need to do tonight is Matt Karen, who is the engineer with Gale Associates that's assigned to the project.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Mr. Mayor, appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening to speak on behalf of the navigation easement project for the Fitchburg Municipal Airport. Again, my name is Matt Karen. I work for Gale Associates Incorporated. We're an engineering and planning firm that provides technical assistance to the Fitchburg Municipal Airport, specifically for the navigation easement project that we're speaking about here this evening. Don't want to take up too much of your time, but I would like to just give you a brief overview of the purpose and need for the project, the history, what led to us being here this evening. First things first, many of you are probably wondering what the heck a navigation easement is. It's a technical, FAA technical term. It simply means an airspace easement, an easement over property. I do have a little board here, show the other side. So essentially what we're talking about when we say navigation easement, this being the runway, this being landowner's property. A lot of times you have houses, buildings, trees, towers, cell towers, things like that. We're primarily interested in grabbing an easement over individuals' properties. There's 3 of them that have been identified this evening that we're speaking about that we're looking to take by eminent domain. That doesn't mean that we're taking the property. We're not going to prohibit the enjoyment of the property owner's property as it is today. It's strictly to remove trees that are above this approach surface that you see here. The approach surface goes out at a 20-to-1 slope. So, of course, the further you are from the end of the runway, the higher the navigation easement is over an individual's property. So the heights do vary. Closer you are to the airport, the lower they are. But real simply, the purpose of this project is to enhance the safety of pilots and neighboring property owners by removing known obstructions. In this case, they're all trees to the airport's approach surface. One of the things that the city does when they accept Federal Aviation Administration funding, each and every time they accept a grant, they sign a contract with the FAA in the form of grant assurances. Specifically, one of the grant assurances, number 20, and I can provide you guys with a copy of this or an email link if you're interested in it, specifically speaks to hazard removal and mitigation. It says that the city and the airport will take appropriate action to assure that such terminal airspace, et cetera, is clear, free of obstructions. You're going to maintain the airport in a safe and operable manner. So that's kind of the purpose behind the Aviation Easement Project. The need is, in 2010, the airport did an airspace survey to identify obstructions located in and around the airport for the purposes of pilot safety, community safety, and among other things, we've identified several obstructions in the form of trees that are penetrating the approach surfaces to both runway 14-32 at the airport. What happened was, as a result of that, the Eastern Flight Procedures team with the FAA actually shut down the airport's instrument approaches at night due to the safety hazard that the trees represent. So currently, the airport is it's open, it's operating during daytime hours. Instrument approaches at night, of course, have since been prohibited. A little bit of history on this project. What I passed around in the 11 by 17 and what you're seeing here is the properties that are shaded in blue are properties where the airport's either already received a navigation easement through negotiations with property owners, and the ones that are in the orange sherbet color there are the 3 properties that we're looking to acquire by eminent domain. There's 2 parcels up here that are owned by the city under the custody of the Conservation Commission. About a year ago, we sat down with the Conservation Commission, explained to them, what the airport was looking to do. The Conservation Commission and the Airport Commission have since signed a memorandum of understanding allowing the airport to go in and do that tree clearing, as have the other properties that are in blue. In late 2013, the airport began its Phase 1 Aviation Easement Project. One of the things that we always do is we meet with property owners, we explain to them the process, we give them FAA literature on land acquisition and public use airports. There's a process by which an appraisal needs to be conducted by the airport. Subsequently, it needs to be reviewed by a review appraiser, both independent, to make sure that the fair market value and the just compensation that's being offered to a property owner is in accordance with FAA regulations. So that process did take place. We had all of these parcels have been appraised, reviewed by a review appraiser, concurrence on that. Once that number's occurred upon by both of those 2 parties, I present to the Airport Commission the appraisal value. Now, the Airport Commission, for example, say an appraisal comes in and it's appraised at $100,000. The Airport Commission, per FAA, cannot go to a property owner and say, let's see if we can get them to bite for $75,000, and then if they don't, we'll just keep upping it. They have to offer the just compensation that's been determined as part of the fair market value through the appraisal process, and that has been done. Back in December of 2014 is the very first time that the offer letters went out to each property owner. We've been trying to negotiate an amicable agreement with each property owner to see if we can come to terms and close on the property. One of the biggest things that I saw through this process was a lot of the property owners feel that the value for the aviation easement should be more than the actual fair market value came out to be, which is fine. We don't oppose that, but I have no basis to go back to the FAA and say that instead of it being $100,000, it needs to be $250,000 without some form, through an appraisal conducted by the property owner, which speaks to that process. So at this point, you know, like I say, back in December of 2014 is when the offer letters went out. These three particular property owners have dug their heels in. Negotiations have failed. They've been failing for quite some time, which is the primary reason why, you know, we're in front of you folks this evening to discuss, you know, taking these properties by eminent domain.
Councilors, before we field any questions, just wanted to bring to your attention Joseph Posnick, the petitioner, just asked that his name be struck from the petition itself before any action is taken. So at the appropriate time, I'll be asking for an amendment there. Councilor Hay.
Things clarified for myself. First off, you said that the Federal Aviation has stopped instrument approaches at night at the airport. Who does instrument approaches at night at the airport?
Commercial aircraft mostly.
Okay.
The number of corporate jet aircraft flying in and out of Fitchburg has decreased dramatically over the last 3 years.
When you said that there were offers that were made, is that public information what those offers were? And specifically, you're going to give me $100,000. What are you going to do to my property? I will.
So yes, it's not quite public information. It is public information for the property owner. So basically, this happens in executive session with the Airport Commission because you're talking about property negotiations, et cetera. So it's done in executive session until we close upon it, and then.
So we don't have access to that information, which is fine.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
And when the owners bought these parcels of property, whether it was 5 years ago, 20 years ago, or 70 years ago, if somebody's been living there for a heck of a long time, was there anything written into their purchase and sale, their deed, their title, whatever? I'm not a real estate attorney.
Right.
That states that they would be required, because they were abutting the airport, to adhere to whatever the big title you said was.
Navigation easements.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So Massachusetts general law does speak to certain requirements for properties that surround airports. As part of the process, we do hire a legal sub-consultant to do preliminary title searches on all of the properties before we even start negotiations. Primary purpose for that is to make sure there are no existing encumbrances on those properties that would preclude the airport from going in and being able to do tree clearing in the future anyway. So we look for things like other existing easements. Typically, you'll find utility easements, overhead power lines, things like that. In all of these properties, there's nothing that exists out there that would preclude the airport from going in and actually doing the tree clearing.
My question wasn't ask whether the airport could go in and do it. My question was, is there something so that the owner knew that there was a possibility of that occurring somewhere down the line?
I would have to review Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 90. I don't have that on hand to answer that question. Yeah.
I just think
No.
if I buy the property and you can show me that they knew that when they bought the property, there was a possibility if their trees grew too high, that the airport had the right to come and take the tops off those trees.
Correct.
Well, fine, then I'm not as sympathetic. But if people didn't know that that was a possibility, then we've got a different...
There's specific language, state language and federal language, that if you're within Massachusetts language speaks to within 2 miles of an airport. There are certain requirements that you would have to submit to Mass DOT before you could ever build a structure that would encroach or penetrate an approach surface. You'd have to get approval from the state on that.
Right, but they weren't building, they just had things that grew. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Councilor Hay, just to confirm, you had asked for property values or the appraisal values. The city solicitor has access to that information.
Sure. Is the appraised values themselves something that we share with the council?
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
It's fine.
Well, do we have those?
Yes, sir.
He does.
You
Yep.
have-
I do not have them on me.
Are you inquiring, sir?
I'd like to know them, yes.
Okay, the first property, and maybe you can point to the map.
Yep.
46,000. You know which one that is, sir?
Navigation easement number 5.
The next one we have is 115,000.
Navigation easement number 3.
I had all three. One second, Counselor.
Okay.
It's 80,000.
It's 80,000?
It's 80,000.
Yes.
Yep.
So the third taking would be the 80,000?
That's easement 4.
That's easement number 4, correct.
Can you tell us how many trees, how much height they're taking off the trees, that type of information? I mean, are they just barely skimming the top, or are they taking a 60-foot tree and making it an 8-foot tree?
No, so what we prefer to do, when we're negotiating with a property owner and they sign onto the abrogation easement process, we can negotiate, we can top trees if it's their preference. What we prefer to do, in most cases, if they're pine trees, they look kind of foolish because most of the branches and stuff grow up top. So it looks like a bunch of matchsticks sticking up out of the ground. So our recommendation, just based on aesthetics, is to remove the tree in its entirety. What we do is we go in, we remove the tree in its entirety, we stump grind it in place, loam over it, seed over it, so that way grass grows back in its place. And quite frankly, the other reason why we do that is because we don't want to ever have to come back. If we can go in there, do it once, do it right the first time, it prevents us from having to be back in there every 2 years, every 3 years. So if a property owner really had a burning desire to have the trees topped as opposed to removed in their entirety, that's something that we could certainly entertain and something that I would bring back to the Airport Commission and say, you know, John Smith prefers that we go in there and just top, and that's the approach.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Green.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. My question would be, what do each of these businesses do on this property?
I can tell you Navigation easement number 3 runs an ambulance service out of there. MedStar ambulance.
Okay.
Navigation easement number 5 is it's a trucking business. I'm not exactly sure what they transport, but they're a trucking facility. Store a lot of 18-wheelers, I believe, on that parcel. Navigation easement number 4, I don't know specifically what those folks do.
Stony Brook Realty?
It's formerly Stony Brook Realty. It's now Primstone.
All right. And on your map here that you've provided for us, you've got, 3.75 acres. Is that the total amount of their lot, or is that what you're willing to take over? That's what you're looking to take over.
The total amount we're looking to take. So, for example, a really good example is Navigation easement number 4. If you can follow along, I know it might be a little tough to see on the 11 by 17, but that property actually goes all the way out to Crawford Street. So where there's the writing where it says Stony Brook Realty, gives a book and page number, and then proposed line navigation easement, that section in white is still their property. We're just taking a partial easement over that, or looking to take a partial easement.
I want to make it clear is we're not taking the property, we're just taking the easement. It does not alter their enjoyment of the property. The property will still be theirs. We're just attaining the easement to allow us to go in and do vegetative removal.
Correct.
Right. And again, my question has to be, if I'm comparing the easement proposals, and I see Navigation easement number 3, MedStar at 7.53 acres at 115K, and then I look at easement number 5, which has more acreage to be taken, 46K. I'm just wondering if MedStar is playing hardball because they can and are not willing to negotiate, or where we're stuck in the translation of everything.
Right. And of course, I can't speak for MedStar, but I know, the differences in the values have to do with multiple variables, and one of them being the specific height over the property. As I was mentioning earlier, that 20-to-1 slope, so the further you are from the runway, the less restrictive, I guess, because the height is certainly higher than if you're closer to the runway. So based on that, based on the appraisal process and similar facilities, that's where that number comes into play, but I don't know exactly why they're playing hardball.
I would like to just make a point that none of these businesses would be impacted by removing trees from their property. Thank you.
Councilor Beazle.
Thank you. So, if I'm understanding this right, once the trees are removed, the owners have the option as to what you're going to do. So in other words, if I'm one of these owners and I have this ugly pine tree growing and I don't want it anymore, and you come in, cut it down, can I say, can you put a maple tree there? Or do you say, we can't plant any more trees there whatsoever?
All right, so the FAA pays 90% of the cost of this project. The state Massachusetts Department of Transportation pays another 5%. Then there's a local share of 5%. It's not FAA eligible or Mass DOT eligible to do replantings of trees. It's, the fair market value, the just compensation that's offered to the property owner, they can do, whatever they want with that money. We, of course, recommend not planting trees that would then regrow into the approach surface, because then the airport has the right to go back in there and clear those trees should they become penetrations. So no, to answer your question, we do not replant trees.
Okay. And I know you've said it a couple times, but so this is under, is it a federal law or the Mass General law that this can be done?
It's both.
It's both?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Joseph.
Approximately how many trees are we talking about?
There really is not that many trees. I don't have like a number per se, and it's difficult because I know that easement number 3, for example, is all paper streets, but there's a relatively large building on that. For the most part, the ground's generally cleared anyways. I mean, it's been turned over a bunch of times, so it's really, I don't have an exact number, and I apologize for that, but it's really not that significant.
In any one of those? I mean, I can't
on any one of those,
I
no.
can't see any one of those being where they are even further back from the airport.
Right.
Having something that's going to approach
Right.
that.
Quite frankly, most of the tree work is going to be on the parcels that are under the custody of the Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
Of course, because they haven't been built upon. They've just been sitting vacant for forever. So that's where majority of the tree clearing is going to occur. And like I say, there's pockets of it on each one of these properties, but not a significant amount.
Most of the properties are commercial and industrial, and there aren't that many trees.
So you're not knowing why they're, because even if they were to want to do something that would go higher in building, they wouldn't be able to do that anyways.
Correct.
Because of where they are in relationship to the airport.
Correct.
Anyway. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing the easements in a peaceful way.
I agree.
Okay. I mean, they're not losing life, liberty, and justice. The ability to have their property, they're going to be able to do whatever they can right now on their property. They just can't build higher because they couldn't be able to build higher anyways.
Correct. They'd be creating a hazard for U.S. airspace. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Just so I understand what's going on here, I'm going to try and use the analogy like if it were my own home. So I have a parcel of land and my house rests on it. And if the planes are coming towards my house and I have, let's say, 3 trees in my backyard around my boundary, let's say, and what you are essentially saying is you want to go in, have an easement passed through this council to say, we have the authority to go in and cut those 3 trees down. We're not taking your property over. We're not the owner of the property. But there is a rider on that easement that says if you were to choose to plant another tree there, that is prohibited.
That is
so there are some restrictions now placed on that property owner's private property.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And the offer of money to them for the fair market value, you mentioned one number was $115,000. The FAA or this whole project is offering these property owners $115,000 just to have the rights to cut some vegetation?
Yes, sir.
Wow. I'm not going to speak for the private property owners, but the way it sounds to me like it's like the FAA coming to me and saying, "Hey, Mr. Di Natale, we'll give you $100,000 if we can cut 3 trees down." Where do I sign? But I'm not going to speak for them, but I would like to hear from them. Hopefully representatives from their company are here, but I get very nervous when we talk about eminent domain because it is private property. The private property owner has every right to do what he or she wishes to do. I just wanted to make sure I can process that you're not taking, unlike other eminent domains where you're taking over the property entirely, this is where you're just taking over the rights of cutting down some trees on that property line on that property, but there's also now restrictions for that private property owner in terms of resurrecting that vegetation.
Yeah.
And you're offering them a fair market value that was gone through 2 appraisal rounds, you
So
said?
it goes through one appraisal process and then a review appraiser. A review appraiser takes a look at the appraisal just to make sure all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I just wanted to...
This doesn't say you can't ever plant a tree there. If you're cutting down a 100-foot tall pine and you want to plant a 20-foot tall shrub or a 10-foot tall shrub, well, go right ahead. But if you're going to plant a tree that has a potential to grow to 100 feet,
I understand.
we're going to come back 15, 20 years from now and we're going to cut that one down.
It's surprising to hear that the offer of $115,000 to cut a few trees down.
It's primarily primarily what's happening is the FAA is pitching in 90% of the cost for these projects. They've invested a lot of time, a lot of money. They want to make sure they have the perpetual rights to keep that airspace free of obstructions, which is why the easement's required.
I understand it completely now, and I understand what you guys are saying. I would be interested to hear from those 3 property owners what their reason is behind it. I think you mentioned earlier that they disagreed with the value.
Correct.
So I'd like to know from them, just to get a full sense of it, considering what is being asked. First when I heard that, I thought you meant taking over the entire property in the building. When I first read this petition, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe they just have disagreement with the value of their property in total. But this is just to do one thing on there. But I can't speak for them. Maybe they're here. I don't know. But I just wanted to make sure I was clear on, to put it in the layman's terms, for like my own kind of property, just so I understand what's going on here.
And just for the record, I want to make it clear that at no point in time did we ever say, no, forget about it, we're not offering you anymore, this is it. The process is, if you feel it's different, what my stance has always been, you need to go out, get an appraisal of your own that speaks to the contrary, and then we can do an appraisal swap and then take a look and figure out why we're so low or why you're so high or vice versa, and see if we can come to some sort of agreement. But none of the 3 property owners are willing to do something like that.
And if this were to pass and you get the easement through eminent domain, do these property owners still get compensated those values?
Of course, yes. Yep.
So they get the money anyway?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hay.
My question was answered. Thank you, Mr. President.
Gentlemen, can I just confirm, you said we have all of the appropriate funding already available with the city through funding for Phase 1 and 2 to pay for this?
We do. So just to make it clear, it's a reimbursable program. So once the instrument's recorded with the Registry of Deeds, I will take that recorded instrument, I will submit a reimbursement request to the FAA and Mass DOT, and then the money will become available within a couple 3 weeks. So, but the answer to your question, yes, the money is programmed, the money's there, the money is known to be going to the abrogation easement.
And so the initial funding would come then from the airport's budget and then reimbursed?
It doesn't necessarily have to. There's a period of time where we can pay the property owners. So again, as soon as the instrument's recorded with the Registry of Deeds, I will get the paperwork in process to get the money. The money will then come in, and then at that point we should be able just to use that money rather than tap into city money at this point.
Great. So thank you. Councilor Hay?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, they're paying the money that will be going to the landowners. Who pays to have the actual work done? Does that come out of the airport budget?
That's a separate project that does come out of the airport's budget. Again, the FAA pays 90% to do the tree clearing, state pays 5%, city pays the other 5%.
So we end up just 5%.
Correct.
Any idea what the number is looking at and what our 5% will be?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Maybe
Okay.
12,000, maybe.
I think the airport share is going to be about $12,000.
Approximately.
Any other questions from councilors? Councilor Dean.
Just a quick question. I think I already know the answer to this, but have these 3 property owners been notified of this meeting?
Yes, they have.
Okay. Thank you.
For the record, they were notified on
2 dates.
December 19th?
Correct.
I only ask because I would hope they're here, just so I can hear from them. Them not being here, to me, I mean, if you're if you're really hard and fast on this for whatever reason, I would expect someone who represents those companies to be here to explain why. If they're not here, that speaks volumes as well, in my opinion. Thank you.
Any further questions from councilors? If anyone, is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of the petition? Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in opposition to the petition? If all has been heard, I apologize. Sorry, sir. Michael, didn't see. Gentlemen, if you could approach the center table, state your name and address for the record. Are you speaking independently of each other, I assume?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Peter Campobasso. I'm an attorney with law offices in Leominster, 3 Park Street. I appear tonight on behalf of Nashville LLC. They are the owners of 70 Benson Street, which I believe is the abrogation easement number 5 on the plan. We have been in discussions and in negotiations with Matt Karen of Gale Associates for over a year now. Obviously, our opposition is that understanding what needs to be done, the nature of the work, we feel that there is a much less intrusive way to get the work done than acquiring an easement by eminent domain. Some of the issues that will result from an eminent domain taking with the easement as it's currently proposed will affect potentially the value, the financing, more importantly, of my client's property due to their lenders and those type of requirements. We understand that with Zach and Julie Taylor's particular piece of property, there's maybe 6 to 12 trees in the very back of their site, which they do not have a problem with those trees coming down. The concern more is how this type of taking being recorded as a permanent restriction on their property going forward will have ramifications on, again, the financing of the property. They just recently purchased the property. As you know, I appeared before this board probably 2 or 3 years ago when they needed to get permits and licenses for their storage tanks. They are in the trucking transportation business of home heating fuel, gasoline, things of that nature, and they also transport water. Their intentions, obviously, were to relocate the business and to expand. And granted, the concept of the abrogation easement, as I understand it, where you're strictly dealing with the air rights, isn't so much of an issue, as I said, because there already are restrictions in place. If they wanted to put a building or expand on their building, any permit would have to go through, I believe, the Mass Aeronautics Commission or the FAA, as they've applied before in the past. We just feel that there is an easier way, a less intrusive way than the taking in the easements as they're currently drafted, putting the type of restrictions on their land that will significantly impact the financing, their ability to finance in the future. Naturally, the assessed value is an issue. We have had appraisals done. We have been in communication and discussions with Matt Gale. I'm sure those discussions will continue. So we just feel, and what I'd like to impress on the council for your consideration, we feel that there's a less intrusive way to do this than to go about the taking. And I would note that the property that is immediately adjacent to Zach and Julie's property is not identified for taking purposes, and that was one of the concerns we had as to why this particular piece was being identified. If you're familiar with their site, as I said, there's probably six to eight trees in the back that may need to come down, which they don't have a problem with taking them down themselves. Other than that, their land is relatively flat. They park their tractor trailers there, and they don't point them up towards the sky. They're just sort of there. So there's no possibility for them to go into that airspace later on.
Councilor Di Natale?
I just have a question as I just thought of this. Because I was thinking of this before you spoke, Counselor, about your clients. and maybe the Gale Associates can answer this too, but I was thinking if this weren't to pass, I mean, you just said that your clients would cut those trees down. They don't have a problem with that. Has there been any negotiation or has there been any offer of having them do the work and the airport reimbursing them for the work, like a signed agreement saying, we agree to cut these trees down on our property and we'll get reimbursed for the expenses by the airport, and then call it a done deal, no easement needed?
Well, we have had discussions, but my understanding, and I'm sure Mr. Gale can speak to this more, with the fact that there's funding coming from the federal government and from the state government, usually there are certain restrictions and guidelines that you have to stay within. We are trying to negotiate something along those lines. Whether or not it can be accomplished really is not, the final say won't come from myself or Fitchburg. It'll come from the money source. So
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
But that's a possibility, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just might add one more thing. Unfortunately, the Taylors who did want to be here tonight had a personal matter which they could not get out of, so they could not be here tonight. But I did let them know that I would let you know that they obviously are concerned, and you'll probably hear from them later on as the process goes forward.
Councilor Green?
Yeah, I would just like to point out that doing your math with the proposed $46,000 for the easement, the aviation easement, based on the amount of property that they're looking at, that's $5,000 an acre. And I don't know any other property in Fitchburg that is selling and or getting that price tag on it. So, again, moving forward, what would be the likelihood, what would you ever foresee taking over that property where a 21-foot aviation easement would ever be a problem for funding and or to turn over that property?
Well, presently, the financing that's in place, the documents include language that there are certain default provisions, valuation provisions. When proceedings for eminent domain take place, the lender will naturally have to be notified. And depending on the financing terms, there's a possibility that the lender could say, hey, we don't like these terms, you need to pay us. So we would not want to cause a default, potentially, in existing financing because we can't reach an agreeable valuation, or the lender feels that their security is being impaired to the point where they can no longer go along with the terms of the loan. So that's a concern that we have.
Thank you.
And as far as your point to the valuation, obviously, we have had our own appraisal done, and while we have not shared that with the council, we have shared some of it with the airport and Matt Gale, and there is a difference of opinion on the value. The Taylors invested a significant amount of money in the property, in excess of $1 million. So the value, we can't treat the value in a superficial manner. There is a discrepancy in what the current offer from the Airport Commission is based on their value of the property and based on what we feel the value of the property is.
And to that point, was your independent evaluation done on airspace alone?
No. It was not done with a notion of a navigation easement because the navigation easement didn't exist at the time.
Thank you.
Councilor Caddy.
Has the lender been notified of these?
I believe through this process they will be notified, but I have personally been in touch with the lender, so they're aware that this process is beginning, yes.
And as, well, maybe a question you can't answer, but maybe they can. There's a lot owned by Walter Desmond that hasn't included in this. Why would that? There's property on either side of it that is included.
No airspace obstructions were identified on those parcels.
But there could be,
There isn't.
in the future, there could be.
There could be in the future,
A
correct.
tree could grow. What I'm not catching on this is you're not putting a restriction on the property, you're putting a restriction on the airspace. And they're willing to pay $46,000 for the airspace, and there's nothing you could do with that property to get a building permit to build anything within the scope of the airport. So, does your client think it's worth more than that? Is that?
No, I think to date, in reviewing the documents that were presented as proposed, obviously documents can be interpreted differently. It's not so much what takes place strictly in the airspace. It does identify items that currently exist on the ground that could later on be determined as potential impediments. Things may reflect into the airspace, not deliberately, but things of that nature. Radio frequency, cell towers. I know one of the concerns that Zach and Julie have is because of the nature of their trucking business, the communication system that they need with their truck drivers. There will be the need to put different type of communication towers, satellites on the rooftop. So there are different things that we have been discussing.
But didn't I understand that in order for them to build anything, they would need to go to the FAA? They would need to suffice all the codes that are in place now within an airport. Is that correct?
2-mile radius.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
2-mile radius from the airport, sir?
Yes.
2-mile radius.
Yep. Which they did when they pulled their permits to construct the current site that's there.
So, the only thing we're talking about is trees. We're talking about trees that exist and trees that could exist in the future.
That is correct, sir.
I'm good, thanks.
Council Beazle.
Thank you. I guess my only question was, you had said that by having this approved, it's going to somehow affect the value of the land, and yet there's an airport there. Like, so it really doesn't matter. I guess my thing is it really doesn't matter whether we do this or not. There's still an airport there, and whoever moves there is going to have to know that there's restrictions, and those restrictions are set up by the FAA. So until the day that the airport moves, those restrictions are going to be in place. So the value of the land, if you went to sell it, you couldn't say to anybody, well, there's no restrictions. You can build whatever you want, because the restrictions exist whether or not we approve this.
Correct. There are certain restrictions that previously existed with the initial taking, and I believe the General Laws, Chapter 90, Sections 35 through 50, already. There are already those type of regulations that are in place for protecting the airport runways, yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is different in the sense that this will be a different type of regulation. It'll actually be a recorded document at the registry. And if you have an opportunity, I think maybe you will understand some of the concerns that the landowners may have if you review the actual documents, because in some of the negotiations, I can't say that it's a take it or leave it, because we have had good discussions with the airport. Those discussions are ongoing. We're hoping we can resolve it. But my main point is to please be mindful that my client, particularly, has invested a significant amount of money at the site. It could impact their financial, their financing that they currently have in place in their operation, their business going forward. It's not strictly about trees, as I said. If we could, we would go out there and remove the trees ourselves so that they didn't encroach into the airspace. Thank you.
Councilor Jones.
I'll address any other questions if you have them, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, so.
Councilor Jones.
So I guess my question to the airport is if Mr. Desmond doesn't qualify for being on your radar because they don't have any current things that are infringing in your space, if performance was to cut down 12 trees and no longer be identified as somebody that has anything within your space, doesn't that their need to have an easement go away?
Yes and no. So when the FAA issues,
Make it go away.
When
So
the F-
that he doesn't have to have that information. You don't pay him any money,
Mhm.
and he doesn't have any language in his deed that says he has a restriction. Why can't you just make that go away if they agree to take the 12 trees down?
Okay, first things first. The last time I've heard from the property owner, and with all due respect to Mr. Campobasso, we have had good discussions in the past, but those have cooled off significantly probably about 3-4 months ago at this point. When the FAA issues money to the airport to go ahead and seek aviation easements, the purpose is not only for now, but it's for the future as well, to protect the airspace now and in the future. So when the money is issued to the airport, there's money that's spent by a legal sub-consultant, the appraiser, review appraiser, negotiations, of course. If the airport were to back off of that at this point, the Airport Commission and or the city, if you will, would be on the hook for the costs that it took to try and acquire a navigation easement over that parcel. Again, where the FAA is paying the 90% on this, they want to protect their investment not only now to get rid of the trees that exist out there now, but to protect the airspace in the future as well, since they're sinking significant amount of money into the airport for various projects. So that's primarily the reason why it's not as clear-cut at this point to just go and clear the trees and then walk away from it.
But as he said, I mean, you're arbitrarily putting an arbitrary easement on his property, which might make him have problems getting finances or selling that property in the future. Whereas Mr. Desmond or whoever who didn't have any trees, he's never going to have to worry about having an easement on his property.
Correct.
These people are going to have to worry about having a permanent easement on the property. But had 10 years ago there been no trees on that property, they wouldn't even be on your radar.
Correct.
I mean, I can understand why we're in a stalemate. I mean, they don't want an easement on their property to have any restrictions. You at this point have dug in your heels to say no matter what you do, somebody's going to have to pay for what we've done to date. So it's like I can understand why they're battling over the money for $115,000 and the principle of the idea. Level the trees, get them off your radar.
$115,000 isn't just for the removal of the trees. They're being compensated for any decrease in value.
But there wouldn't be anything, there would be, if there was no trees on there, they wouldn't even be on your radar.
Correct, but also for perpetual rights in the future as well to prohibit any of that.
Mr. Walter, you didn't ask Mr. Desmond for perpetual rights.
If trees start, when the next time the airport goes out there and they do an approach survey, if there were trees on Mr. Desmond's parcel, they'd likely be going after that property for a navigation easement, or at the very beginning of the project, at least seeing if they'd be willing to take down the trees on their own. In this case, that was something that was discussed, several months back, and then subsequently conversations have cooled off, like I had mentioned, and it becomes more of, the airport is into this to get the easements, like I say, not only for the existing trees, but for future aviation easement rights to protect that airspace. That's why the airport's pursuing with the easement at this point.
Good. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the petition? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Peter Hodges of 14 Felton Street in Waltham, Mass. I am the property owner of parcel number 4, easement number 4. Not a lawyer, but I've done my best to understand how this process is supposed to go. To my understanding, it's somewhat unavoidable that the airport will obtain rights for what it needs. And so, as I understand it, it is a matter of process of finding out what is fair and equitable. Now, I don't believe the process has been fair, has been moving towards establishing a fair price. I've asked many times for the assessments, for the appraisals from the airport. When I go to my appraisers, they say it is customary for them to provide their appraisal, and it makes sense to me as a layman. If I were a bank and somebody wanted to, borrow money on the property, an appraisal is required for me to assess the value of that property. In this case, there's a refusal to provide the appraisal, and I'm not able to understand why. So when I go to my appraisers, they say they don't even know what the request is of. There is a somewhat technical, formal process for the appraisal that you have the property valued before and after, and it's the difference that is the fair value of that compensation. And it can be meaningful. It can have a significant impact on the resale value of a property. I would be surprised if any of you would be willing to impinge your homes by having an airport encroach further into your space without compensation. It's a matter of what is fair. Now, there's other reasons I feel that it isn't clear what the airport is asking for here. I don't believe it is just to maintain existing air flight path. To my understanding, there is a request to the FAA that I guess it is approved to extend and enlarge and change the use of the airport. If that is correct, I'll be disappointed that this process did not disclose that. There is also the impact of not being able to extend off the back of my building. I'd like to put on low additions, but I'm sure with the land being clear-cut and planes flying so low that below, that they argue that a tree is impinging on the flight path. It's awfully low to the building that I have. Truth be told, the building is much lower than the trees. Also, I think their appraisal, as it is, for what they make it, is not fair. They made their appraisal at the time when the building didn't have as much value. We have invested millions into the building for our extended, manufacturing, and so the value of the building has changed. And so that's pretty much pretty much it. I'm willing to follow the process. I've expressed my desire to get appraisals, but it is not clear how I could fulfill my role in helping the city and the airport achieve its objectives if I don't know what they want, and they're not able to, and they're not willing to share with me how they derive their assessment of what is fair compensation.
Councilor Green.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hodges, for being here. I am a commercial property owner in Fitchburg, and I have a permanent easement on my commercial property for the right-of-way of a utility company that will always be on my property. So, again, I understand your concern with having that on your property. Your property sits directly behind what used to be Can-Am or Asher Pant?
Yes, it is Asher Pant Building.
That is that facility?
Yes.
Okay. And how long have you owned this piece of property?
Since July 23rd of 15.
And when you bought that property, you knew that there was an existing airport within that 2-mile radius of your property. And on your deed or anything that you signed to acquire this property, was it ever brought to your attention that there could possibly someday be an aviation easement on your deed?
I did know that there was a request for an aviation easement.
Is there such a significant difference in the $80,000 that's proposed and the amount that you are hoping to acquire? I mean, is it like night and day, or is there such a discrepancy that it's absolutely like, no way, I'm never agreeing to this?
At the moment, because of the way the process has been, I'm reluctant to proceed, without a fight. I believe that things could be brought out more forthrightly. I actually look at this as an opportunity to resolve what could be a dispute that would have to be handled in a different way. I think I may have even proposed to the airport that we seek and find a mediator. But those types of approaches haven't worked well for me.
All have been heard.
Can I just clarify one thing for the council?
Yes, sir.
I would not want to give the impression to the council that we have refused to talk with Gale Associates or the Airport Commission. We have sort of not communicated because the last communications we had were, we will take the trees down, let's work on some other arrangement. We'll take them down within your permit, we'll get our own permit. It came back to us that, sorry, that's not an option anymore. The only option is the navigation easement. So, knowing that, once again, it wasn't simply the Taylors, my clients, not being willing to have discussions with the Airport Commission. We were essentially told that the option of them taking the trees down was no longer an option. And that's when discussions sort of fell off, because we were told we're going to start the taking process. So we were just waiting for this process. And I would once again like to stress to the councilors, read the documents themselves, read the proposed documents, and when you realize that suggestions or revisions to proposed documents can't be agreed to, it's kind of take it or leave it, and that's hard to negotiate with. So I would hope that you would take the time to read the documents and see for yourselves some of the concerns that could be raised by a potential landowner, knowing that you can't really negotiate those points.
Thank you. Councilor Hay.
If I could just ask the airport folks, these takings here, are they in any manner driven by the future change at the airport where they're looking to extend the runway?
Navigation easements would need to be sought regardless of any extension at the airport. So as the airport sits today, we'd be out there getting easements.
If and when the airport does extend the runway, as they've been looking to do for a while, will there be other easements that will be required?
Not in the runway 14 end as we sit here today, now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to add one thing about the, we appreciate the property owners coming here tonight to discuss this, and we appreciate their desire to work with us about, we'll cut the trees down, you cut the trees down. The only way that the FAA is going to fund this is if we get the easements. They will not give us money to cut the trees down without the easements already in place. So that would put a much larger burden on the airport's budget.
Is there a time restraint regarding this? If this council chooses not to grant the easements, can you guys go back to the negotiating table and try to?
We could, but the Conservation Commission is insisting that we do the tree cutting in the winter for frozen ground conditions because it causes less damage. So we have a time crunch.
We've been, again, we started this process back in December of 2014. It's been going on for well over a year with the hope of doing tree clearing during winter of 2015/16, which is where we are at this point. So it would throw things off a little bit, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Campobasso, just before I look to close this hearing, I just suggest that, one moment, sir, that you mentioned some documents that you had filed. I just encourage you to reach out to the Solicitor Pusateri and make sure those documents are on file with the city, so that there's not any questions or confusion.
Can I ask that the airport clarify what their expanded usage plans are?
We can certainly relay that message to them and for communication at further time. Thank you, sir. Are there any other individuals looking to speak in opposition to the petition? If all have been heard, I declare the hearing closed. Councilors, just a reminder, before any action is taken, I just ask that the language Joseph Posnick, Chairman, on behalf of the be struck from the petition.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second to amend 250-15 to strike the language Joseph Posnick, Chairman, on behalf of the. Yes, speaking to the motion, Council Caddy. Because that individual has no longer, or will soon no longer be part of the Airport Commission, and in fact, it was more about the Airport Commission itself and the airport itself taking the necessary action, not the individual himself. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It's unanimous. The matter is before you. It's okay.
If I'm believing everything I hear tonight, I would encourage all parties involved to get together very quickly and try to resolve this and be back to us within 2 weeks where we can resume a hearing and see if we can settle this. But I have too many doubts in my mind on both sides of the argument for me to be making a vote tonight.
Councilor, the hearing has been closed. However, the petition could be held for a couple of weeks. Councilor Hay.
Just going to point out that the hearing had been closed, so we could not recess the hearing. We just have to hold it.
Councilor Green.
I'd like to make a motion that we hold hearing 250-15 until our February 4th council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and second that 250-15 be held until the February 4th meeting. Speaking to the motion, Councilor Dean Sally.
So we're just going to hold it for 2 weeks. And we're going to, I mean, what's the end game after that? It's taken over a year. Do we expect them all to be in agreement on something in 2 weeks? I mean, I'm getting sick and tired of hearing how there are time constraints on these things. If there has been negotiations going on for well over a year, this should have been submitted to us a long time ago then. There should have been a point reached 4 or 5 months ago where the commission, the contractors with the commission, where they said, we're not getting anywhere after 6 months of negotiations, why don't we put this forward and maybe see if the council can get them to move forward on this more quickly. We're doing this now where we say, well, there's only 1 or 2 months left of winter, so I feel like we're boxed into a corner here. I'm going to vote against holding it because, quite frankly, I don't know if holding it's going to solve anything, because if something can't be resolved in a year, what makes anybody think it's going to get resolved in 2 weeks? And if it's not going to get resolved in 2 weeks, we're going to hold it for another 2 weeks, then another 2 weeks, and then we get to the point where we're out of the winter months, and it defeats the whole purpose. I honestly think we should take an up or down vote tonight. I will be voting against holding it because I'm not clear what purpose that's going to serve unless I have something in writing that says the property owners and the Airport Commission and the Gale Associates are going to all reach an agreement in 2 weeks. And I don't believe their clients are prepared to say that right now. I don't expect them to be. So we can hold it. I don't see a purpose. Thank you.
Council, I've been informed by the solicitor that negotiation can continue beyond in terms of assessed value of the land. So regardless of the action taken tonight, they could continue negotiating on the assessed value. Councilor Caddy.
I'm all set.
I have Councilor
I'm sorry.
Green next.
I guess my hope with holding this is that we could come up with maybe a different term other than take by eminent domain from this, so that all the parties involved could get more information, come to a better understanding of what the long-term effect is, because I don't like the fact that we would sit here and make an argument that we would allow the airport to take by eminent domain these particular pieces of property. Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
So if we were to pass this tonight, we would be granting that easement, correct? Which is what they want. The FAA and the Airport Commission wants that easement. Then they just battle over the assessed value.
Allowing the city to move forward with the purchasing. So, Councilor, they'd be allowing the city to move forward with either accepting as a gift, purchasing, or taking by eminent domain.
Yeah, I mean, I know they can negotiate after, but that's a central piece of the whole issue. So I haven't been convinced during this hearing tonight that both parties are on the same page and that there's been enough going on. I never feel comfortable speaking for private property owners where I don't have a stake in it. So if this is going to be voted on tonight, I'm not voting for it. Thank you.
Council, we have a motion and second to hold until the February 4th. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Do we need 2/3 for that? No. Okay. All right. The motion passes 6-3. (248-15) special permit hearing. Jeffrey Dumais for renovations to property located at 196-198 Water Street that has been vacant for more than 2 years. Renovations to include rental apartments on second and third floor and commercial spaces on the first floor.
My name is Jeffrey Dumais.
One moment, sir. I declare the hearing open. We have someone here representing the petition.
My name is Jeffrey Dumais. I'm out of Somerville. I was just trying to renovate this property, and I got this approved.
Could you please state your address for the record, sir?
Which one? Where I live?
Where you live, yes, sir.
7 Memorial Road in Somerville.
7 Memorial Road. Somewhere.
Apartment 207.
Thank you. Go on.
Well, I don't really know how this process goes, so it's my first time. I got disapproved from the community development, and they were saying that they didn't pass my petition because my property was too big for the square footage as one of them, and the parking coming in and out would cause traffic on Water Street, and that because I don't have a yard, that it would be a house of last resort and not a house of choice, and that there's a surplus of rental and commercial space properties in Fitchburg. And I would like to just say that I disagree, I guess, and that the property, I wasn't informed that the building was too big for the property when I bought the house, and that there's already a previous parking lot that comes in and out of Water Street that was previous there before. So I don't understand why that is a problem, and I just don't understand why it would be a last choice of rental.
So, Mr. Dumais, we have several councilors looking to speak and ask questions of you, but I just wanted you still have the floor if there's anything else you'd like to add about what you intend to do with this property or why it is that you choose to invest in this particular property before I turn the floor over to you.
I'm just trying to live there, and I was trying to start a business. My girlfriend does nails, and I cut hair, and we were just going to use the commercial spaces as that. And then there was just a bonus that it had another floor, because when I bought the property, it was already kind of almost done. I just coming in and kind of investing in it, because I seen it was a boarded up house, and before I bought it, there was a lot of people going back there and drinking and stuff like that, and I just thought it was like a diamond in the rough that I could just fix.
Councilor Hay.
Yeah, is this before us because it was vacant for more than 2 years, and so it's not grandfathered in for zoning?
That's correct.
Okay. What was the use prior to your, well, it was unoccupied for 2 years. But does anybody know before that 2-year period what the use was and how many apartments there were?
Do you have any sense?
I was told that it was a plumbing company before on the first
floor.
Yeah, and then on this, I guess it was one apartment, I guess, before.
Okay. One apartment on the second and third floor?
Yeah, but when I bought it, it was converted into 2 already.
So when you purchased it, there were two apartments there, but they had may not have done it with permits and.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Okay. Because I'll be honest with you, one of my big things is, we got rid of it a couple of weeks ago for future things. The 2-year issue. If somebody's doing the same thing, if it's a 2-family and they're going to make it a 2-family, that's one thing. But if it's a 2-family and they're trying to make it a 4-family, then we've got a whole different ball of wax in front of us. And I don't seem to have the information.
I have. What are you looking for?
Exactly what the use was before.
Oh, before, I don't know.
And if it's changing.
Okay.
Not changing is one thing.
Yeah.
If it is changing, then that's a whole different thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Green.
Well, welcome to Fitchburg.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, this probably isn't, from my understanding, I'm your ward counselor in this area, and it's probably not going to go well for you tonight. This building was owned by the Casinos up until 1995. In 2003, it was sold and as an investment property. And over the life of this building from 2009, where the assessed value was $276,000, to a year 2015, where the assessed value was $26,600. When was the last time that you were actually in this property?
When I bought it, probably before, probably a couple, inside,
Yeah, inside.
I go and check up on it weekly, just because last time I had people breaking in, and there was people just hanging around, like, and stuff like that.
So you purchased this property when?
July, I think, or June.
Of 2015?
Yes.
Okay. And since then, you're telling me that you've been to this property every week since you've purchased
Not every week by.
Like on a monthly basis,
Yeah,
checking?
I go back and forth.
Does your property still have wiring and copper pipe still left in it?
No.
And the reason, one of the reasons that you were not awarded for this property was that it's a non-conforming lot, which means that you have no parking whatsoever on either side because of the bump outs that hang over the property. The property that, I don't know if you were promised that there was a parking lot that you could access, but the property directly that abuts you on that side is a city-owned property that has $164,000 worth of tax owed on it. So if you were hoping to acquire that city-owned piece of property for your parking lot, it's $164,000 worth of tax owed on it.
Yeah, I wasn't looking to buy that, but when I got the plot plan, the side was I had a driveway.
On the right-hand side of the property where that window or that part butts out?
Yeah.
That's not 26 feet long for a vehicle.
Okay. I don't really know.
Did you have a lawyer help you buy this property?
Yeah, I did, but he didn't tell me none of this. And then the guy that sold, the lawyer that was representing the other guy, he said that everything was all right. I just needed to go to the city and then get permits to build out.
So you were hoping to invest money in the property to open a business and to live there. You were going to move from Somerville.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Council Tran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, you mentioned that the home is boarded up.
Yeah.
Actually, it's more than boarded up. It's a disaster. It's an eyesore.
Yeah.
And I congratulate you for spending $40,000 on purchasing it.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have an investor spending $40,000 on it, putting an effort into rehabilitating the property, it's going to stay as a disaster property.
Yeah.
And it's going to stay like that forever.
Yeah.
I can see right in front of my eyes here the parking space you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's a picture of it. There's 2 cars in it.
Yeah.
So you can actually fit 2 cars in it.
Yeah.
So I don't see a problem with you, who have already bought this property that is classified as residential commercial, and try and put some energy in it and converting it back into a residential commercial property. Even if you put some paint on it, put some windows on it, unboard it, it still look 100% better than what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Councilor Giutatali.
You know, that section of Water Street, right from where the church is, that has been vacant for some time. And I know that lot where you bought the building. It's across from where my in-law's mother used to live. And I drive by it every day, and it's very, very tough to look at. So, you know, once again, when we get these kinds of petitions, I roll my eyes, not at you, but at the process, because I ask myself, does this city want to keep the buildings the way they are, or do we want people to invest in them and make them better? Councilor Tran just said it. You could take the boards off the buildings, throw some paint on it, it'll look 100 times better. And I shake my head during these hearings for you, because I feel bad for you, because we in this city, barring some very constructive people who say, oh, well, there's not enough for 3 spaces, but there's enough for 2. I honestly don't care about that stuff. I care about the building looking like a disaster and depressing the values in that neighborhood. And first thing I ask myself when these petitions come up is, what does the property look like right now? It looks deplorable. What do I hear from constituents every week in this city about? abandoned buildings. This building's depressing my value. Here you've got someone from outside the city, bonus, because we get people who buy stuff from outside the city, they're not going to live there.
Yeah.
The bonus for me is you're going to live there.
Yeah.
Okay? You're going to live there and you're going to operate a business there where there was a business already operating. So there was a business on the first floor. There were people who lived in that building. So I asked myself, well, what was the parking for these people when they owned the building? I mean, they had to have parked somewhere. So that is not as much of a concern to me as allowing you to move forward, because you bought it, you said, back in June?
Yeah.
So you've owned it for 7 months, and you haven't been able to do anything to it because of this process.
The only thing I did was paint, and if you guys want to look past the phone around, this is what it used to look like. And this is what it looks like now.
Yeah. There's 2 pictures.
And that's the inside of it, correct?
No, that's the outside.
That's the outside of it. I haven't been by there in a couple of weeks, but
The outside was painted dark.
maybe I've been driving by it too much and I just don't look at it anymore. But
You can swipe it. That's what it looks like now. Swipe it.
yeah.
Nice color choice.
So there used to be a structure in between those 2 buildings that's now a vacant area, I believe. Yeah, and there's brush overgrowth there and whatnot. So, you know, I've said it before and I'll say it again, that I am not picky with these kinds of orders because I look at 2 things. Were there people living in that building before you bought it? Yes. Or I know it's been abandoned, but before it was abandoned, there were people using it as a residential space, and there was a business operating in there. You would like to have it be a residential space and operate a business out of there.
Yeah.
To me, it's the same use, whether it's 1 apartment or 2, and you're going to be living there. So it's going to be owner-occupied, not an absentee landlord, which we have plenty of in this city. So,
If you go to the
yeah.
left side.
Jeez. Yeah. Thank you
Just
very
didn't-
much.
I just didn't remove the windows because I didn't want them to break in and do anything
Yeah,
crazy.
it's- you know,
there was a fire that started behind there because I guess they were trying to keep warm, and they started a fire.
I will just say right now that I am not going to stop you from moving forward with this.
Thank you.
Because that looks a lot nicer than what it used to look like. And we need more investment to take over these abandoned, decrepit buildings. And it's a bonus for me when you live there. So I have no problem approving this. Pull the necessary permits, have them all inspected like a normal homeowner would do.
Yeah.
Case closed for me. Thank you very much.
Councilor Boishman.
I hate to say it, but I think they're going to have a hard time selling it to me. And I disagree with Mr. DiNatale, Councilor DiNatale. Number one, I looked at your parking situation.
Yes, sir.
And you're backing out to Water Street.
Yes.
Water Street is a major artery to the city of Fitchburg. Major artery. You're coming from a blind spot, you're not going to see people walking down the sidewalk, and you're coming into the street, and you're going to, can't see. Can't see. You're telling me that you're going to rent there. You're going to live there, and you're going to operate a business.
Yep.
Are you going to tell me you're going to live there for the next 50, 60, 70 years, or are you going to rent it out?
I'm going to live there. My girlfriend is planning on going to Wachusett Community College and then trying to get a job around here.
You know, I argued 2 weeks ago. The last time we were at a meeting, and I didn't want to pass that special permit. I wanted a special permit to come here so we could put restrictions. And we're saying now, and I feel sorry for you because you invested money. So you put me in a bind. But we got no rules on vacant properties in the city of Fitchburg. This is what really pisses me off. None whatsoever. And a guy like you comes in here that wants to do good, and I'm stuck. You invested $40,000, and I'm stuck here saying, what are we going to do? Am I going to reimburse him? You know, councilors, Councilor DiNatale, I know you want these properties, vacant properties, abandoned and gone. I want to put rules on these vacant properties. I want rules. This, to me, is not safe. Backing onto a major artery.
Okay.
This is not safe when you cannot see. Coming out. You're coming down the street, you can't see. And it's almost like you're on a bend, too, because I went by there, a little bend. It's even harder to see. You got no yard, and if you rent the second floor or the third floor, which you plan on doing, and you rent the kids, where do they play?
There is a back area.
I've been there. I went down there.
Back there, I was planning on concreting it. It's not going to be a grass area, but at least they'll have some type of area to run. And there's going to be a deck so they could sit and lounge and just enjoy the view from the back.
You know, our neighborhoods, some of our neighborhoods are bad because to get good clientele into your house that people will care about, want adequate parking, and they want a halfway decent yard so they can put a barbecue up and sit down and enjoy a beer and do whatever people do. You know, I don't know. I think you're going to have a hard time with me, sir. I'm sorry. I know $40,000 is a lot of money, but to me it's a lot of money. You're coming out onto Water Street, and I have a hard time with that.
The only thing I would have to say, just like not to argue with you, I just want to understand that before there was backing up when the plumbing company was there. So I understand. And there's other houses up more that are doing the same type of thing back onto Water Street. So I just don't understand how it's so different from up the street and then from where I am.
Well, the house, the vacant lot and the house next door to you park in the back, and they're parking in behind where the St. Bernard's Rectory or the schoolyard used to be. They park there. This house used to do the exact same thing. They used to park in the back and walk around and do the business. I don't even know if there's even parking in front of the building. I didn't check that when I went by today, but it's going to be hard right there because you're on a bend.
Yeah, there's an hour parking that's
Is there an hour
in
parking
front of my building, yeah. And then just like the glass company, they go in and out. It's not like they could exit through another way. It's just the same thing.
But the glass company, Paul's Plate Glass, is that you can pull in, and then you park, you can back up, and you're facing where you can look this way and you can look this way. You're not doing this. You can't see. You can't see if there's a small kid behind your car walking behind it because you're in between two buildings, and you're coming right across the sidewalk.
Is there any alternative where I could rent a space from somebody? You know,
I don't know. I have a hard time, really.
Council Beazle.
Thank you. At the last meeting, we voted to send all of these off to people who are planning the city and who knows what's best for the buildings in our city. I think at that meeting, people thought that I was against that. I actually want that. I want it so that people who own these buildings can actually go to our building department, our Board of Health, and actually say to them, so what do I need to do to get this building so that if somebody chooses to live here, it's safe for them to live. I know last year I had voted on one of these because I actually thought I saw a letter from the building inspector saying, yeah, he approved of it. Actually, writing to him the other day, he wrote back to me and he said, if the special permit granting authority, which is us, doesn't require it as a condition they set on the permit, then the owner's balk can tell the building department that we can't force them to do it. Our authority to require updates depend on them for applying for permits. So basically what he's signing off on is saying this is a non-conforming building, and if you do work and pull permits, you're going to need to bring things up to code. So think about that. If I'm buying the building and I get it approved by us, but I know that if I go to the building department, they're going to make me bring things up to code and pull permits, who's going to pull permits? Okay? And this is why I'm saying this does not belong in front of us. I appreciate that the fact that you want to invest in us. I will not be voting for this. Somewhere down the line, I think, if you wanted to, and I believe you can, appeal it back to the planning board and other commission. I'm just saying that I'm torn with this because I want safe housing in Fitchburg. Somebody said to me last week, what we need to do is hire more inspectors. How many of you have been to the Neighborhood Improvement Committee meeting? These people are sending inspectors out, they're handing out tickets, then we need to hire lawyers to go to court. And I know that that's not your problem, but this is what the city's facing. We're spending a lot of money on the same problems over and over and over again, and we're never going to get ahead until we solve it. I don't like vacant buildings. I don't like to see them boarded up. I've got some in my ward. But at some point, a building that is unoccupied for 2 years, at some point, somebody's got to let go of these buildings. And I'll be honest with you, I'm all for saying some of these buildings have got to go. Okay? I will not be voting for this tonight, but I'm not opposed to this gentleman going to, whether it's the building commissioner or other people, and reaching out to them and getting educated on what he's actually going to need to invest in this property to make it safe. And then once that's all done, I think I'm fine with it. But I can't sit here tonight and just say, carte blanche, rubber stamp, because it's boarded up, we're going to pass this through. And that's really, I can't do that. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Mr. Dumais, I'll allow you to respond.
I pulled permits, and I got a structural engineer, I got a land surveyor, I got an architect to come in. I was just basically waiting on you guys. Like, I got a licensed plumber, I got a licensed contractor, and a licensed electrician. I'm just waiting for you guys to come in. I seen the wiring person that comes, and I told him he's gonna come inspect it after. I'm just trying to get past this point. I want to do everything up to code. I'm not opposing it. Obviously, I want to be in a safe house. I don't want to burn with electrical or have water leaking through. You know, I'm just trying to get past this step so I could do the right steps to go through this process.
Okay, so in all the paperwork that I have, sir, I have not seen anyone say that there's been permits pulled on this location. And
I have a contractor. Hold on a second. I might have left that one, but I did pull a permit. He wouldn't let me do it without pulling a permit.
Thank you.
It's in the city hall files. If you want me to email it to you tomorrow or anything, I could do that.
Thank you.
Councilor Hay.
Just a question. Since we had, at our last meeting, changed the process so that these buildings that are vacant for over 2 years don't come before the city council any longer, they go to the zoning board. Is that an option that would be available, I guess this is to the city solicitor, for this gentleman, if he so chose to withdraw this petition and then refile a petition which would then be sent to the zoning board of appeals?
He could withdraw his petition. He could refile it. Excuse me. There's a filing fee issue. I think Councilor Di Natale discussed that last time.
That was going to be my next question.
Yep. It could be done. The withdrawal could be done based with a motion and a vote, and you could condition that withdrawal to refund I would see no problem with that. He would have to feel confident, excuse my voice,
yep,
that he might be able to be successful in another body. Okay. And he's already receiving some of your feedback at this point, so it's something that he would have to decide on his own.
Just so that you understand, we've had a whole bunch of these come to us over the last 4 or 5 years, and at our last meeting, we decided that we didn't want to be the authority any longer because we didn't have the expertise, and we voted that
The zoning board of appeals is now the authority regarding properties that have been abandoned for over 2 years and what the new use will be. So you can go with us and we'll take a vote. Or if you wish, I would be glad to make a motion to give it leave to withdraw and refund the application fee that you put, because you're going to have another application fee if you want to go before the zoning board of appeals. And they're the ones who are technically going to have the ability to say, this is what you're going to have to do for electrical, this is what you're going to have to do for plumbing, this is a parking issue, that type of thing. That's just, I mean, I'll vote for this tonight. But if I just wanted the gentleman to have all the information to best suit him. If somebody's trying to invest in Fitchburg, bought a property, and wants to do something with it, I say, let him go.
Councilor, just to quickly respond to that, while we passed the petition, the ordinance has not yet been written, so we have not yet seen that. So there would be a delay of at least about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, minimum. Then
yes,
you may not want to choose that.
Councilor Caddy.
This question's for the solicitor. I just want to be clear on this. If we pass this petition tonight, this gentleman said he has already obtained a building permit. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And there's no wiring in the building, there's no plumbing in the building, so he'll have to get a plumber, licensed plumber, and a plumbing inspection, a licensed electrician inspection. He has to update the building to present codes.
To the extent that he's doing work there.
Okay.
So, for example, if there was a portion of the building that he wasn't making improvements on, that would not be necessarily true, sir.
Okay. So if we pass this, he'll have to get an architect. He'll have to deal with a building inspector, basically.
Mm-hmm. I already got an architect.
He would. And, sir, you could also, if you considered passing this, you could also make additional conditions so that you felt assured, so that when he goes to the building department, the building commissioner can review what conditions you felt were appropriate.
In order to do business in this city, he'll also have to get a DBA, so he'll have to go to the clerk's office to get the DBA. He won't be able to do that unless he has a certificate of inspection from the building commission. So I guess my point with everyone, we have a young man here from Somerville, Jeffrey, is that your first name? Sir. That wants to invest money in this city in an empty and an abandoned building, which God knows we have many of. Walmart's not coming to save us. What's going to happen in the city is we're going to have people like this gentleman right here coming in and putting his life savings on the right on the mark here to try to make a go in Fitchburg. I will vote for this. I will vote for this.
Councilor Di Natale.
So I understand. So if if we pass this, the way I'm hearing people say is, if we pass this gentleman may not ever have to pull a building permit or any permits at all. If that's true, how is that any different than anybody else in the city who doesn't pull permits to do work in their houses? I said it a few weeks ago. Unless we have a secret police force that's going to go to every house and check everything that they do in their homes and see if they pulled a permit, this is a moot point for me. And I'm very frustrated with it, because if we're going to stonewall this because we say, well, he doesn't have to do anything if we pass this without restrictions, how's he any different from someone who's owned a home for 30 years and does things in there? I know you have, sir. I'm just saying.
I don't want to do that.
No, I know. I'm just being hypothetical here. How is it any different than a homeowner who's had a home for 30 years who builds an addition, never gets any permits? I mean, we cannot police every single resident in the city. Now, I understand this is a special case, and not to sound like I'm a rubber stamper, but there was an existing commercial property there already. There was an existing homeowner who lived in that building already. This gentleman wants to live there. He wants to open a business there. As far as I know, homeowner, business. Before him, homeowner, business. Not a lot changed. Now, where did those people park? I'm assuming they didn't have hovercrafts that parked above this roof. Okay? There must have been parking there. And I have gone into that lot, Councilor Boschman. I don't know what you're talking about not seeing the roads. You can see them quite clear. Where you can't see them is across the street at the bottom of, I believe that's Nashua Street. At the bottom, you can't see to the right of you. Should we put lights there? Because that's more dangerous than where this gentleman's going to be parking. And then there was a comment made about where the kid's going to play. I don't care about that. That's his prerogative. It's his property. If he has children, it's his right to have them play wherever they want and assume the risks. We're going to talk about kids playing over there? That's not my call. That's not anybody's call. Good Lord. Thank you.
Councilor Boschman.
You want better neighborhoods? That's what I want, better neighborhoods. The city's run down. If we're going to pass this tonight, if this council's going to pass it, then let's put this requirements on here. Bring the building up to the today's current codes, including fire protection and energy. Investigate and evaluation by a registered design professional. You're going to get that guy, and you do everything to that. Now, I got one question for the city solicitor, because maybe I misunderstood you 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago. When we came up and we were talking about that special permit and you wanted it to go, you said, correct me if I'm wrong, if I misunderstood you. You said a person that owns a single-family home and a two-family home does not have to come in front of the zoning board or the planning board for the special permits. We're treating them the same. The only ones we're going after is the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So if he wants to, he doesn't have to go in front of that.
Yes,
if we give him the okay.
He has a commercial and a single or two-family, depending upon how he uses that space. So he wouldn't fall within the exception of a single-family or a two-family.
All right. So if we put these restrictions on it, then go for it. Now, I'm still against it. I don't like it. I don't think the yard's big enough. You're gonna live there, and like everything else, I said I was going to live in my multifamily to the day I die, but I wanted to expand my horizons, and I moved out, and I rent my apartment house. And I'm not against people renting, don't get me wrong. But all of a sudden, you're not the clientele. Clientele means a lot when you rent an apartment. You get the good ones, and you get the mediocre ones that just don't care because of the area, and people don't want to go. Mm-hmm. The clientele means a lot. That's it.
Councilor Green.
Again, I don't want you to think that we don't commend your efforts, but I really wish that whoever the legal team that you were working with could have walked you through this process so that you got a big understanding of what's going to be required for that building. And my other point is, I'm not a big fan now of taking a property like this that sits there and granting these special permits knowing that the property next to the abandoned property of yours is cited to be coming down for demolition, and that potentially for a community parcel of property has some potential to do something better with it. So, again, looking forward thinking on moving Fitchburg forward, I commend your effort, but I'm not sure that was the most ideal location for you to want to do your business and live. And we have 2 community members here in the audience that I would like their opinion on this property. We've got Mike McLaughlin and Larry Casassa, so I'd like to hear their opinion on this piece of property.
They'll be given an opportunity to speak momentarily. Councilors, I look at this as, will the building outlast the owner, which is likely in any scenario? Will the building become an agent of change? Will it become an asset to the neighborhood, which is an important criteria, objective as it may be, or subjective rather as it may be. You can't help but ask, is this property an asset to that neighborhood? I've lived in the city for about 12 years. I don't remember in my time ever seeing that property as an asset to this city. It wasn't when I came to this city. It isn't today. And I have no doubt, sir, that you have every intent of investing your time, efforts, and talents into this building, but that's a huge task. And like so many others who have been granted this permit, they make every attempt to do it, and when they fail, we're left with a building as disastrous and as a wreck as we started. And then we've prolonged the period for another 5 years, and we've had every service and agency in the city investing time and effort in. We have too many of these properties in the city that aren't an asset to their neighborhood. I wish there were several other properties that are in much better shape, that are primed for someone to come in like yourself. But I look at this building and say it's a better candidate for demolition than for occupancy today. And particularly, you look at the location, the parking, what have you. I have a hard time looking at that property and saying that you are set up for success in that with that property, and that in 10 years we're not going to have had more calls by the building police or fire or safety to it than otherwise. So I would not be voting in favor of this. That said, is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the petition? Is there anyone here wishing to speak in opposition to the petition? Mr. McLaughlin, if you could please approach the center table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais.
Good evening, councilors. For the record, Michael McLaughlin. I am on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I guess I'm here more as a resident, and I don't want to necessarily say I'm here to speak against it. We see these properties everywhere in the city. I'm hoping my battery doesn't decide to go out after sitting here for 3.5 hours. The property that's before you tonight is before you under 181-3561, which is a special permit for non-conforming structure that's been abandoned or not used for more than 2 years. Simply, it says within that section, to be eligible for such special permit, the structure must have architectural and other features deemed appropriate for rehabilitation by the city council. That's the gist of what the council should be looking at. It's tough. I see great vision, right? Youth, investment in the city. This is 2016. We're starting fresh. As a resident and living in Fitchburg for many years, I have to say that it's unfortunate first that somebody purchased some property without knowing what they could do with the property before they purchased it. It seems like this may have been the particular situation, right? You don't put money out unless you know what you can do with the property. So, it's a buyer beware. It's unfortunate. I look at Fitchburg. I look at all of you. You're here tonight because you love Fitchburg. I'm here because I love Fitchburg, okay? And what's right for the development of our gateways? We have a property that's been abandoned for 10 years. We have an empty lot that's in the middle of that, and to the right, we have another property that's abandoned. This is the gateway. We've all seen there's three parcels in a row that are just horrific. What's right and what's best for the city of Fitchburg, okay, is a potential rehabilitation of exactly what this building is. It's a non-conforming building. It could not be built and utilized as it is being requested by today's standards, okay? If you look at, yes, there's 2 pictures of cars parked next to the building. I actually went there tonight and I parked my car in the so-called driveway. You cannot open your door because the lot is so narrow between the building and the side property line, okay? If you try to open the door on your passenger side, you are encroaching on the abutting property. So there is a place to pull a vehicle in, but is it safe? Is it adequate? Okay? There is no parking on the other side, albeit there probably could be. Okay? If any of you walk the property, half of the building is piled up against the rear of the building, and it looks like some of it is starting to slide down the embankment into the river. It's been there for a long time. Okay? As a resident, I just say, let's do what's right. Let's encourage development. Let's encourage young guys to come in, or anybody by that matter, to develop. But is it right? Is it fit? Is this building fit? Is it fit our plan for revitalizing our gateways? It's an obsolete building. It probably, if anybody has any good understanding of development, the cost to renovate and reuse this building far outweighs its value. We've all seen in the city where the city has actually been, probably one of the worst advocates for selling excess property to people that have no wherewithal to redevelop, okay? And these buildings continue to sit undeveloped, okay? Almost all of our schools that we have sold, here they sit 10, 20 years later. I don't know if there is a financial plan or if this plan is funded, but what we don't want is, a subpar development that takes 5 to 7 years to get this place off the ground. It needs site work, it needs exterior work, it needs a complete and total renovation. But again, let's just do what's right and best interests for the future of Fitchburg in this particular area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to the petition? Mr. Casassa.
Hi, councilors. I'd like to start by saying that none of my comments are intended in any way to reflect on judgment about the petitioner himself. I haven't met him before tonight. He seems like he's sincere in his efforts, and I certainly, laud him for that. My comments that I sent to you in written form were based on the situation that I was presented with, which is the current city zoning standards and the fact that this property lapsed because of a lack of investment, in large part because of its low value and the high cost of renovating it over the past several years. And that's not an atypical situation in Fitchburg. We see it all the time. And a large part of that is because the city was built really at the turn of the previous century and at a time when people walked to work. There was no need for cars, and there were no need for the kind of lots that are normally required. Well, the city created a zoning ordinance that requires much larger lots these days to meet the requirements for modern living. And the current size of the parcel, 2,900 feet, is just over half the size that's required for a single family with a special permit in an infill under our current zoning. So if we were looking at this anew today, which is essentially what we're doing under our current zoning ordinance because it's lapsed, we wouldn't even allow a single family to be put on this property. Now, I recognize that it had, in years past, some commercial use or value. I don't think it was ever used for parking on the sides of the building as it's currently configured, and that's my biggest concern about its use, because I don't believe there are driveway aprons there, so those would have to be installed. And because the parking is so narrow, it would have to be 2 cars stacked on either side of the building to meet the minimum needs that would be required. And to do that would further congest and create a traffic safety hazard to a thoroughfare that we're trying to make as easy to pass as possible and as attractive as possible for commuters who will trying to get in and out of the city. I don't really think that that's in our best interests. Although, again, I have compassion for anyone who invests in a property and who has good intentions. I know that the reason we're dealing with a lot of vacant and abandoned properties in the city is precisely because the value of properties that are on parcels like this is so low that the ability to obtain private financing, what they appraise out at, which is based on how you get financing, is so low as to be less than 1/2 or 1/3 of the amount of financing you get is less than 1/3 or 1/2 the actual cost of renovating these properties. So even if this petition were to be granted tonight, unless the petitioner has deep pockets, I question whether or not we're going to see that property renovated, because he acknowledged that it's been gutted, and typically the cost for dealing with properties like that runs into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, while the value, even upon completion, is, again, 1/2 to 1/3 of that. So it's very difficult to obtain financing for that reason, and it's generally not considered a wise business decision. But that's not my main concern. There are circumstances where it happens. It's the characteristic that we're dealing with on a daily basis in our neighborhoods, and it's the reason why a lot of these properties are not being developed. The financing is not there, and it's why we don't allow grandfathering when a property is vacant for more than 2 years. So I know there have been previous petitions in similar situations, and they've been denied, and in other cases granted. I'm not sure. Maybe there should be a general discussion of this committee, of the council as a whole, on how we would like to approach properties like this. But I do think we should adopt some consistent practices in looking at properties like this. And again, I'm looking at what was presented before me, which is that special permits should only be granted upon written determination that the benefit to the city and the neighborhood outweigh the adverse effects of the proposed use. So the burden is on the owner, according to our current zoning requirements. And that's the perspective that I took when I looked at this.
Thank you, Mr. Casassa. Councilor Hay.
I guess for the city solicitor, it's not the first time we've been in this position where somebody's purchased a property and then found out that there was hurdles that they needed to go through. Is there a difference whether somebody pays cash for the property or gets a mortgage? If you're going to get a mortgage, wouldn't there be a process by the bank would say, well, you have a problem with this property? And do we run into these more when it's a cash payment?
You run into these more with a cash payment. When you get a mortgage company involved, there's certainly an additional third party, as an independent business interest. They're going to make somewhat of an inspection of the premises. They want to get an appraisal to the property. The appraiser's going to go through the property and give us an opinion of fair market value.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in opposition to the petition? If all have been heard, declare the hearing closed. The matter is before you.
Move 248-15 be granted.
Second.
A motion and second. 248-15 be granted. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Who was in favor?
Sorry, those in favor? Those opposed? Hands, please. The motion does not pass.
This is the done deal, basically?
Sir, you'd be entitled to file an appeal with the district Superior Court.
Councilor.
Would another option be for him to wait until the ordinance was written and then apply?
Would that be a repetitive petition?
Huh?
Sorry. Excuse me, sir? Different board? Well, I'm going to tell you it would depend on how the zoning board would view that. If the zoning board viewed that as a repetitive petition, he would have to wait 2 years. If Mr. McLaughlin, who's on the zoning board, articulated that it would not be because it's a different board.
Solicitor, would it be appropriate for me to ask these petitioners to converse with you this week and for what the next step could be, if they're allowed to repetition?
So my position for the city is I represent the city of Fitchburg. I'm not capable of giving you any legal advice, but if you have an opportunity to give me a call, I could try to direct you in the right direction.
So basically, I could only tear it down.
At this juncture, unless the decision is overturned, you're going to have limited options with the building.
So, do you have a card?
Unfortunately, we were talking about that today, unfortunately.
Are you on the
but I'll
website?
give you.
You on the website?
I do have a card, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I'll let you two connect. 24015, City of Fitchburg Planning Board to amend Chapter 181 of the Code of the City of Fitchburg entitled Zoning and accompanying zoning map as follows. Add a new section 18189, West Fitchburg Corridor Overlay District. Declare the hearing open. Is there anyone here representing the petition? Are you speaking? Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of the petition? Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in opposition to the petition? So, councilors, I received a communication from Mike O'Hara of the Planning Board. They actually held their hearing on this same matter this evening. So they're asking that we continue this hearing for them to be present on February 4th. So I'd entertain. I have a motion and second to continue 24015 to February 4th. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Do I have to close it? Okay. All right. Orders, finance.
Move 00716 through and including the 1116 be sent to finance.
I have a motion and second to send 00716 up to and including 01116 to the Finance Committee. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? It is unanimous. Petitions.
1216 be sent to a public hearing on February 4th, 2016.
I have a motion and second to send 1216 to a public hearing on February 4th, 2016. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. 01316, special permit petition, Robert LeMay to renovate non-conforming building that has been abandoned or not used for a period of more than 2 years at 148 Myrtle Ave, map 33, block 124, lot 0. Public hearing on February 16th, 2016. Councilor Di Natale.
I have a question. I don't want to touch this with a 40-foot pole after what we've just been going through the last couple of weeks. Is there any way we can nip this one in the bud right now and have it go somewhere else without it going to a public hearing with us?
Unfortunately, Councilor, and I'll allow the city solicitor to correct me, we don't have an ordinance on file that will give this proper mechanism.
I would, defend the property owner, I would not want to take this up right now. I'd rather hold this as long as possible until that ordinance gets passed. In my opinion, it's my opinion. I mean, for me personally, I'm done with these. I'm done with them. I can't. I think it should go to the more appropriate boards that we pass the petition on. We should just wait till the ordinance gets written and passed, and then have these go there. Thank you.
So, did you have something relevant to action that would be taken on this petition here this evening?
Yeah, can we speak on it? Find out,
I would prefer to, if you're going to address this at length and we're going to field questions, I'd prefer to push this out until the public hearing on February 16th.
Well, my only, I do have something I think would make it a little easier.
All right.
Okay,
Please.
First point.
If you would at least approach the center table, please, and state your name and address for the record. I'm just going to ask you to keep this very brief, if you could.
My name is Peter LeMay. My brother Robert's here. This property, we own the property to the left, and we own the property to the right, so it's not quite the same thing. This is an apartment building that was a four-family. It's only been deemed abandoned because of the foreclosure process. It's not abandoned. We could actually protest the abandonment because the utilities have been on the whole time. The question is the foreclosure people is why it's been vacant, but it's really, we've renovated 11 buildings in the college area, so we own the one on the left, the one on the right, the one on the side of that one, and the one diagonally across from it. So I don't think this qualifies in the same area. And it's a four-family, and I think your zoning to go to the other board was the two-family and under. So this is a special permit.
So, sir, I guess the question at this point then is, given what you've seen in the process that this has undergone, would you prefer either option one to withdraw your petition and wait for this to appear in front of another body, or would you prefer for this to continue to a public hearing on February 16th?
Public hearing February 16th.
Second.
I have a motion and second to send 01316 to a public hearing on February
on that?
16th. Speaking to the motion, Councilor Di Natale.
I'll vote to send it, but, I hope you come prepared with information, like, do you have children who are going to be playing in the backyard? Real pertinent stuff that we're going to need to hear about.
Actually, with respect to all of that, there is an awful lot of recreation space. 4 times.
I was being facetious.
You'll have an opportunity to address that on February 16th. Thank you, sir. I have a motion and second to send 01316 to a public hearing on February 16th. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is unanimous. I have a motion and second to adjourn. Speaking. I have a motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is adjourned.
You made it.